Imagine being in a meeting room. Everyone is talking, arguing, trying to assert themselves. But there's one person who remains silent. He watches, listens, and waits. As the minutes pass, others begin to talk more than they should, revealing insecurities, exposing unnecessary information. In the end, those who seemed passive were actually in control the whole time. Now think, do you really know when to speak and when to stay silent? Or do you fall into the trap of revealing too much without realizing it? Silence is a tool of power that few people master. In a world where information is the new currency and where everyone competes for attention, those who learn to manage silence become more respected, more influential, and harder to manipulate. But how can you use silence strategically without appearing weak or indifferent? Niccolò Machiavelli, one of the greatest political strategists in history, understood that power lies not in the one who speaks the most, but in the one who controls the flow of information. He knew that those who speak without strategy lose their advantage before they even realize it. In his classic The Prince, Machiavelli makes it clear. A cautious leader never reveals all his intentions, because excessive transparency is a trap. In this video, you will discover how silence can be your most powerful weapon for earning respect, avoiding manipulation, and influencing others without saying a word more than necessary. Let's understand why the greatest strategists in history, from political leaders to successful businessmen, use silence as a tool of dominance. And most importantly, you'll learn exactly how to apply this strategy in your daily life to have more control over your interactions and decisions. But before we continue, I want you to reflect and comment below. At what point in your life did you realize that speaking less might have been the better choice? Your answer might help others see the power of silence. Now, let's dive into history and understand how this strategy has been used through the centuries and how you can start using it today. To understand the true power of silence, we must look at history. Great leaders, strategists, and visionaries have always known that those who talk too much lose. But those who master the art of silence end up exercising influence without ever raising their voice. Think of Julius Caesar, one of the greatest generals of ancient Rome. During his military campaigns, he rarely revealed his plans to his subordinates before the moment arrived. He left his enemies uncertain, unable to predict his next move. The result? Victory after victory. His silence was not a weakness, but a tactic. He first allowed his enemies to reveal their intentions, then made his move. Now bring that into the present. Think of a business meeting. Have you ever noticed that the most respected people are usually the ones who speak the least? But when they do speak, everyone listens? That's because they know how to manage information. The one who remains silent first gains time to observe, analyze, and understand others' weaknesses. And when they do decide to speak, their words carry weight. This is where Machiavelli comes in. In The Prince, he wrote, "Men must either be caressed or annihilated, for they will avenge themselves for small injuries, but not for great ones." What does that mean? That sometimes it's better to say nothing than to speak halfway and expose yourself to danger. The most common mistake people make when seeking influence is believing they always need to be heard. But the truth is that silence has a powerful psychological effect. When you stay silent, the other person feels uncomfortable and fills the void with words, often saying more than they should and exposing themselves unknowingly. This happens because humans fear silence. In a conversation, when there's a pause, the natural instinct is to fill it, and the first to do so usually reveals more than they intended. The greatest negotiators in the world know this and use silence as a weapon. They ask a question and simply wait. The other party, eager to break the silence, often ends up giving away valuable information without even realizing it. Now think, how many times have you put yourself at a disadvantage just by talking too much? Maybe during a job interview, a negotiation, or even a personal argument. Have you ever found yourself over-explaining something that didn't even need a justification? That's a common trap. Machiavelli understood that true power does not lie in the one who shouts the loudest, but in the one who controls communication. Silence creates mystery, commands respect, and intimidates. That's why great leaders, From politicians to CEOs, master this art. And here's a challenge for you. In your next important conversation, try an experiment. Speak less. Pause before responding. Resist the urge to fill the silence. Just observe. You'll see that people around you will start to talk more, trying to decode your intentions. That's when you'll gain the advantage. Silence is an abyss, a void that is feared, but also one that protects. In a world where everyone screams to be heard, the one who remains silent becomes a mystery. And mystery is a subtle and powerful form of control. Machiavelli understood this well. He knew that words are like sharp blades. Once exposed, they can wound, they can liberate, but most of all, they can reveal. And those who reveal too much become vulnerable. The true strategist is not the one who speaks with unrestrained eloquence, but the one who manages his voice as a rare and precious resource. Silence, when used intelligently, is not absence, it's an amplified presence. It doesn't mean submission, but self-mastery. The one who knows when to be silent becomes the figure that everyone tries to decipher. Look at great leaders, those who have made history. They rarely spoke excessively. When they did speak, every word was measured, every pause calculated. In those moments, silence wasn't a lack, it was a statement. The absence of words can be more meaningful than the most well-crafted speech. Because silence imposes something rare these days, doubt. And doubt is uncomfortable. Those who speak little make others fill in the blanks with their own interpretations, their own fears and insecurities. And there is power in that. The modern world underestimates silence. There is a thirst for exposure, an almost desperate need to be understood, validated, accepted. But those who always seek to be understood surrender their essence without resistance, becoming predictable and easy to manipulate. Machiavelli would say, "There is no power where there is predictability." A man who does not fully reveal himself carries an invisible weight. What is he thinking? What does he want? What will he do next? This uncertainty makes others hesitate before attacking you, before judging you, before trying to control you. In chess, the player who reveals their strategy too early has already lost. The best solution is not an impulsive attack, but patience. Observe. Wait. Let the other person reveal themselves first. Machiavelli believed that the most dangerous war was not fought with swords, but in the minds of men. He knew that information was the true currency of power. The one who controls what is known also controls what is feared. And silence maintains control over that currency. There is another aspect of silence that disturbs, its ability to resist. In a world where everyone explains themselves, those who don't become a challenge. Silence can be a form of refusal, a way of rejecting the game of validation. It is an affront to the collective need for a response. It can be uncomfortable because it forces us to face what we avoid, uncertainty. And uncertainty forces us to think. Religions have always understood this. In many spiritual traditions, silence is seen as a path to truth, a bridge to what cannot be expressed in words. After all, some things lose their essence when spoken. Perhaps that's why those who speak little seem to hold hidden knowledge, a secret that others cannot access. But maybe the real secret is precisely this, knowing what not to say. Silence is not empty. It is filled with the presence of those who know how to use it. Machiavelli understood that ruling is not only about acting, but also about knowing how to wait. Silence imposes respect, creates distance, and transforms uncertainty into advantage. The one who masters silence does not need to raise their voice to be heard. Let's explore how this principle can be applied to daily life, from trivial conversations to crucial decision-making moments. Because in the end, it's not just about learning how to speak well, but knowing exactly when not to speak. Silence is an art, and like any art, it requires mastery, patience, and intention. Knowing when to be quiet is not just about withholding words, but about understanding the right moment to use them and the exact moment to keep them. In politics, in business, in relationships, words spoken without calculation can be a weakness, but well-placed silence can be a wall, an invisible fortress that protects and confuses at the same time. The question is, How do you use silence without appearing distant, weak, or disinterested? Silence should not be empty, but full of meaning. And there are ways to ensure that it works in your favor. The pause has a powerful psychological effect. When someone speaks nonstop, without spacing their ideas, their words lose strength. But when there are pauses, what is said gains weight. The pause generates anticipation, forces others to listen, to digest each word. Great speakers understand this. Martin Luther King, for example, used silence between phrases to amplify the impact of his words. Each pause made his voice resonate longer in the minds of listeners. But the pause isn't limited to speeches. In everyday life, a simple pause before responding can completely shift the dynamics of a conversation. When someone asks you a provocative question, instead of reacting impulsively, stop and look the person in the eyes. The tension created by silence will often lead the other to soften their tone, to reveal more than they intended, or even to rethink their approach. Silence doesn't have to be an absence. It can be an invisible force field. Not every provocation deserves a response. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful answer. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that those who over-explain lose. Because justification implies a hidden admission. If someone feels the need to explain so much, maybe something is wrong. In political debates, the weaker side often tries to force the opponent to explain. But strategists know that often, the best don't fall into that trap. A firm silence can make the accuser seem desperate, like someone throwing words into the wind without real effect. Silence, here, becomes a mirror. It reflects the weight of their own accusation back at them. And this doesn't only apply to politics. In any environment, work, family, friendships, there are times when the best thing to do is not to argue, but simply to observe and let the other exhaust themselves trying to get a reaction from you. One of the most interesting effects of silence is that it creates a void. And most people can't stand a void. If you stay silent long enough, the other person will inevitably try to fill it. They often end up saying more than they should. In a negotiation, the one who speaks first usually loses. A good negotiator makes an offer, then stays silent. The other person, uncomfortable with the void, often ends up revealing their weaknesses, conceding prematurely, or reformulating their position in a way that favors the one who waited. This also applies to informal conversations. When you remain silent in the face of a provocative question or a manipulation attempt, the other party feels compelled to keep talking, to justify themselves, to fill the space you left. And the more they talk, the more exposed they become. Knowing how to remain silent is, above all, knowing how to control yourself. Speaking is an impulse, a natural reflex to fill spaces, seek connection, affirm one's identity. But true strength lies in the one who is not a slave to their own need to speak. Machiavelli believed a leader should be master of their emotions. And there is no greater demonstration of control than someone who does not yield to the impulse of an immediate response. You'll notice something curious. Silence attracts. It generates magnetism. It turns absence into presence. Because in the end, what is not said often holds more power than any speech. Silence is not empty. It is a space where power accumulates. The one who masters this art not only avoids traps, but forces others to reveal their intentions before him. Silence is not just a protection. It is a weapon that disarms, a shield that attacks. So now we come to the final question. How can we tie all of this together and apply this knowledge to transform the way people perceive you? We'll connect these concepts to your daily life and show how small changes can completely reshape your presence in the world. If you've ever experienced the power of silence in your life, share your story in the comments. Because the best way to learn is to observe, and sometimes the best way to teach is to remain silent. There is something fascinating about silence. It scares, provokes, disturbs. But above all, it imposes. In a world where everyone seems to compete to be heard, those who choose to remain silent gain a power few understand. Machiavelli knew this. He understood that true influence doesn't always speak.